All right, let's talk about something that's, well, it's everywhere in the tech world, but is so often misunderstood. Scrum. It's a word that gets thrown around a lot, often wrapped in jargon. So today, we're going to cut through all that noise and get right to what it's really all about. I mean, seriously, think about it. Have you ever been there? Or at least heard the horror stories? You spend months, maybe even years, following this super rigid plan to a T, only to launch and find out the world has completely moved on. It's an incredibly frustrating feeling, and it's exactly this problem that lit the fuse for a whole new way of working. And this slide right here, this really gets to the heart of that change. On one side, you have the old school, traditional way of doing things. Lots of upfront planning, super resistant to change, and just clunky. And on the other side, you've got Scrum, which is all about adapting, welcoming change, and being flexible. To really get why this shift was so huge, we've got to look at the problem it was trying to solve. So what was the big, fatal flaw with the old way? Well, it all boiled down to one thing, really. The impossible task of trying to perfectly predict the future, especially in a world that just refuses to stand still. Before Scrum came along, the dominant approach was something called the waterfall model. Now, think of it like building a house, right? You get a perfect blueprint, you lay the foundation, you put up the walls, then the roof, all in a very specific order. But what happens if you're halfway done and you decide, you know what? I want a huge window right there. Well, it's a massive, expensive nightmare to make that change. Now, imagine trying to build complex software that way. It was a recipe for failure. So all this frustration with these old, rigid methods, it was really reaching a boiling point. It was becoming obvious that just tweaking the process wasn't going to cut it. What was needed was a totally new way of thinking, a whole new philosophy for how we build things. And so, in the winter of 2001, 17 of the smartest people in software development got together at a ski resort in Utah. Now, these weren't just a bunch of random folks. They were experts who were all united by this one burning thought: there has to be a better way. And what came out of that meeting was the Agile Manifesto, a short, powerful document that pretty much kicked off a revolution. And what's so striking when you look at these principles is how human they are. This isn't about Gantt charts and strict deadlines. It's about making customers happy, empowering your team, and actually embracing change instead of fighting it. The whole focus shifted from just following a plan to delivering actual value as early and as often as you possibly can. Okay, so we've got the why. We understand the philosophy, but how does Scrum actually take these big ideas and turn them into something you can use every single day? Let's break it down. The engine that drives Scrum is something called the sprint. It's a short, focused burst of work, usually just a couple of weeks long. Think of it like a mini project. You start by planning what you're going to do. You have a quick check-in every day to make sure you're on track. At the end, you show off what you've actually built. And then, and this is so important, you take a breath and reflect on how you can do even better next time. It's this constant loop of doing and improving. Now, this isn't just chaos. There are 3 key roles that keep this whole thing balanced. You've got the product owner, who is basically the voice of the customer. They decide what needs to be built. Then you have the development team. These are the experts, the builders, who figure out how to build it. And finally, you have the Scrum Master, who is like the team's coach, clearing roadblocks and making sure the process runs smoothly. But here is the secret sauce, and this is probably the most important thing to understand about Scrum. It is so much more than a process. It's a mindset, and it's built on these 5 core values: the courage to tackle tough problems, the focus to get the work done, the commitment to the team and its goals, the respect for each other's skills, and the openness to be honest about the work and the challenges. I'm telling you, without these values, the whole framework is just an empty ritual. So, a powerful framework with a strong set of values sounds pretty great, right? What could possibly go wrong? Well, as it turns out, a whole lot. Let's take a look at where things often go off the rails. There's a saying you hear a lot in the Scrum community that just hits the nail on the head. Scrum is simple, but it is not easy. The rules themselves? Yeah, you can learn those in an afternoon. But actually changing an organization's culture to truly live and breathe those values we just talked about, that is the real challenge. And this chart right here, it shows us exactly where those cracks start to appear. Look at that. A massive 40% of problems come from what we call superficial adoption. That means teams are just going through the motions. They're holding the meetings, they're using the buzzwords, but they're completely ignoring the core values. And so often, the wider organization is still stuck in a culture of blame, where every little mistake is a fire to be put out instead of what it should be: an opportunity to learn something. But here's the thing. When it's done right, when a team and an organization truly commit to it, Scrum is an absolute game changer. And it forces us to ask a really fundamental question. What does success even look like? In the world of Scrum, there is only one true north, one ultimate measure of progress. It's not about being on time. It's not about being on budget. It's not about how many status reports you filled out. It all comes down to one single, incredibly important thing. That's it. Working software. A real, tangible, valuable thing that a customer can actually use. That is the holy grail. Every single sprint, every single cycle is designed to produce a potentially shippable piece of the product. It's all about creating real, usable value, not just checking items off a list. But it's not just about the software itself. Success in Scrum is bigger than that. First, yeah, are you delivering real value? But also, are your users actually happy with it? And is your team working in a way that's sustainable, or are they heading for burnout? And finally, are you always looking for ways to get more efficient, tracking things like cycle time to make the whole process smoother? It's the whole picture. And so we're left with this one final, really crucial question. It's one thing to adopt the meetings and the roles and the terminology, to do Agile. But it's another thing entirely to really embrace the mindset of collaboration, flexibility, and constant improvement, to actually be Agile. And that, when you get right down to it, is what the Scrum Manifesto is all about.